Okay, Sierra, just move it all the way down and all the way up a couple of times. It's not connected to anything. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the original design I had for using the 3 on the tree to run the 4L60E worked, but the main problem with it is it had a lot of slop in the steering column because of that joint right there. Because the steering column sits like this, while to have this adapter flat against the firewall, it sat like that. So because of the whole geometry and the angle and everything, that joint had to be really, really loose in order for it to not bind up. And I didn't like that, and I tried messing with it, and I ended up actually breaking off the arm on the steering column. So that kind of screwed that deal all together, and I had to kind of redesign it, and this is a much better way of doing this, and it's just altogether more reliable and more refined. So this truck originally had a 3 on the tree, and basically the only thing I had to do with the steering column is, which this is kind of a cutaway of the steering column a little bit, this would be the arm for the, I think that would be first and reverse maybe, and then second and third, whatever one though. This is the firewall side. So this one I just cut off altogether because it was in my way. This one broke off, so I just kind of ground it down, and this piece right here, this second piece, is what actually moves back and forth to grab each arm. And I took that and welded it around to the first arm, and then the dash lines is I had to drill 2 holes through each piece of metal. And that's how I fixed this whole thing to it. This is kind of, if you were looking in the engine bay at it, this is the top view of it. So most of it is the same as the original design, it's just most of the change is right here in this area. So what I did in order to keep it from binding and allow it to move and twist in the way that it needed to in order to run through the gears is I took one of these bolts, it's threaded down here, it has a kind of a hex deal on it, and then it has this ball on the end of it. So I took that and took a nut, I don't know what the outside diameter was, the inside I think was 3/8 or a half, one of the two, whatever it was, and I drilled it out so that there were no threads left, but it still fit fairly tightly, not to the point it was binding up, but it was snug on top of this ball. And so I put the nut on, and then I took a washer, cut a slit out of it, slid it between the 2 of them, so on the back side of the nut, and then I welded that washer to the nut. And what that does is it keeps that nut from coming off of this bolt, so that it can't come off, just rattle off or anything. So once that was on there, that was pretty much fixed permanently. And then I took this same nut and welded it to the top of this rod, which was from the original design. So this then runs through this hole. These small ones are the bolt holes that bolted up to the steering column shift arm. So once that's on there, that allows it to work like a shoulder and not bind up and work efficiently in the way that it's supposed to. And I had to cut quite a bit of it off in order to get it to not hit the master cylinder, because this thing has power brakes on it, so it has that big booster on it. And all of this is kind of you're just going to have to kind of figure that out on your own, because all the different angles and stuff, it's going to vary just depending on how you bend this piece and how big this piece is and where you put the hole here. And that hole I put off to the side because that's how it worked on mine. So you're just going to have to play with it and kind of figure it out. This, all in all, to do this, I think probably about a solid day of trying to get it to just mock up and get all the parts together that I needed and whatnot, because there was a fair bit of fabrication involved in this. So this piece here, that's from the original design. It's just a piece of 3/8 stock that I threaded the end of it. This piece here is 2 nuts that I put on here, then welded them together so that the threads lined up. And then this piece here, I believe, came off of this piece. And basically it is just a nub that the plastic kind of eye thing on the trans-shift cable can connect to. And so this runs through this small piece of pipe, then you thread that on, and I put a bunch of thread on there because that gives it some good adjustment, and that came in really, really handy when I was trying to mock all this up and get everything to work right. And this is just a half-inch piece of gas pipe, and I had to kind of flatten out the end of it, which is why it looks flared like that. I had to flatten out the end of it just to kind of keep it from rattling around and to keep it where I wanted it. And then it's welded to this piece, which I believe is 1 inch. It could, honestly, it could be a little bit smaller than that, I think. So this piece came off the Tahoe. This I actually cut off of the steering column, and it's what the trans-shift cable clicks into. And I drilled a hole through the backside, and this is a right here is a bolt that I welded the head to it, and that will save you a lot of frustration, because since that bolt is welded to this whole thing, you can put it through the firewall and you can put this thing on and take it off by yourself. You don't need 2 people, one person on one side holding the bolt, the other messing with the nut. So it makes it a lot easier. And on top of that, this bolt would be incredibly difficult to get to, because this whole piece gets welded to this piece of 1 inch pipe. As you can, right there, that's the top of it, and it would come down and then bolt up to the firewall. So really, that bolt head is right up against this piece of metal whenever it's put on there. So that came off the Tahoe. This piece kind of acts as a spacer. You can see it right there in this top view to kind of align it better with the steering column, so that the angle and the geometry is just kind of happier. And it just made it work a lot better. Pushed it away from the steering column a little bit and kind of torqued it at an angle. So that just got welded to the back of this piece that came off the Tahoe. This piece right here was just some scrap that I had, and it got welded to the side of this 1 inch pipe, and this actually bolted down to one of the bell housing bolts, because the bolts, they have the nut, the part that screws into the block, and then they have a little extra on them, and so I just used that extra in order to mount this bracket on there. And you need that bracket because whenever this thing swings all the way down to get it into first gear, it puts quite a bit of torque on it, and the whole thing wants to twist like that. And if it does, it won't allow you to get it into first gear before the steering column runs out of travel. So this keeps the whole thing from twisting and allows you to run through all the gears just fine. I don't remember, that part is welded to the 2 nuts. I don't remember if I said that or not. So it's pretty simple. All in all, I don't know how much money I had in this. It was probably under 20 bucks, just because a lot of this was just scrap. The only thing I really had to buy was 3/8 stock. Everything else was just crap laying around. So thus far, this has worked really good. There's hardly, most of the play that's in this is actually in the, whatever the, I don't know, the lever in the cab. I can't think of the friggin' name of it. The lever in the cab, that's where most of the play is, and actually in the steering column. This joint right here has no more play in it. It's 100 times better than it was. This piece is bolted up solid to that now, so that's pretty good. And I used fairly small bolts on that. I don't remember what size they were. They were, gosh, I don't know. I don't think they were as small as an 1/8, but they may have been. Just to bolt that up, and that worked pretty good. So all in all, this works a lot better. It's a lot more reliable. It's a lot less likely to break. It's a much tighter system, and overall, it's just a lot better. Oh, and that was the, so last thing, and this was kind of the first deal, what I did on the first one. This cable's pretty small, and it just, to keep it from just kind of floating around in this big pipe, I took some like 1/2 inch of that, whatever, I don't know, it's just some weird off-brand colored rope, and I just packed it all around the inside of here, just to kind of, because this is plastic. It's plastic, and then the metal rod comes out of it, so just to kind of support that plastic, I packed a bunch of rope in there. just to kind of give it some extra support, just so it didn't just snap that off and then give me a problem later. So that's pretty much how this works. It's really simple, and it was easy to make. So really, there's not a whole lot of modification to the steering column. This whole thing, you could probably get this done. You could probably get the whole thing done in a day, just if you already had everything. Mainly just the hard part is getting it all mocked up, getting everything at the right angle so that you can go all the way from park all the way down to first, because it's, you know, park, reverse, neutral, drive, third, second, and first. So you have 7 settings you have to run through, and you pretty much need the full swing of the steering column in order to get that on this particular way that I did that. So hopefully that's not too confusing. It's a pretty simple setup, and it worked. Thus far, it's worked really, really good. It grabs all the gears just like a... It's actually a little bit softer than the 92 Silverado. It just kind of flows through the gears nice and easily, and you have a lot more control over what gear you're in as opposed to the other one, because the other one was stiff enough that you would try and, you know, go from first to second, and you'd end up putting it into neutral or something like that, just because of how stiff it was. So this one, a lot better, 100 times better than the original one. I wouldn't even recommend doing it the way I did originally. This is probably the way it's going to stay, because it works really, really good. And hopefully this video was helpful to you, and hopefully it helps you get your project underway. So I got the shift linkage back together, and the cable actually hooked up to the transmission now. And what I did here with this little guy is, this is a bolt that has like a ball on the end of it. I don't know what they're called, but that's literally what it just has a metal ball on the back with that, so it can act like a shoulder. This was a nut I drilled out to the diameter of that ball, and then I took a washer, cut a slot out of it, stuck it, put the nut on, and then stuck the washer in and welded that washer to that nut. And the ball is too big to go through the washer, so it keeps those the nut and the whatever, this bolt together. And so, because the geometry of this rotating is the same as this, because of how that has to sit up against the firewall, that acts as a shoulder and kind of lets it move around without binding how it needs to. And more importantly, it takes up all the slop, because the other one had to have a lot of slop in it so it could rattle around and move to what it needed to be. And then I had to weld a piece of metal there to push that away from the cab, and then there's a support here welded to this piece that runs down to the transmission bolt to keep it from flopping over whenever you get into first gear. But so here's how it is. So park, reverse, and not a lot of play. Most of that play is actually in here and in the lever itself, because there's just a nail holding it and not an actual pin. So reverse, neutral, drive, third, second, and first is all the way down. And unlike the other one, you can actually be controlled about upshifting, whereas in the other one you would try and gently go from first to second and you would end up in reverse or something because it was really stiff. So this is much, much better than the first one. It took forever. I've spent about 2 days on this, mocking this up and trying to get it right, but it was well worth it.